Hello, today I'd like to teach you how to make the thorn stitch hat. As you can see here, the thorn stitch hat consists of a top-down hat that you start right at the crown and go all the way to the base. And because of that, you can modify the sizes really easily simply by adding more thorn stitches as you need. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to cover how to make the thorn stitch and how to do increases and decreases and a few other tips so that you can start the pattern. If you're a beginner crocheter, I'm going to really go slowly through all the steps so that you can learn to make the stitches first in case you don't know how to make those stitches. And if you're an experienced crocheter, you might want to move right up ahead to where I start the pattern. I'm only going to be doing part of the pattern to the point where you can basically be independent and finish the hat on your own. And there will be a link to a printed pattern that you can download with full instructions there. All right, so let's begin with the stitches on how to make the thorn stitch. All right, I just have a little swatch here that I'm using to teach you on, and obviously this isn't a hat. Now the thorn stitch is worked in the round and always with the right side facing. The right side of the fabric has a characteristic of what I would call A's or maybe upside down V's or V stitches, depending I guess on the way you look at it. So when you're working top down, they look like A's, but when you're wearing the hat, I guess they look like V's. And this is what is considered the right side of the thorn stitch. However, if you reverse the hat inside out, it's also lovely on the other side. On the other side, you have kind of like these vertical strands that kind of form a pattern with the V stitch in between the vertical strands. So some people might prefer this to be the right side. It's really completely up to you. All right, so to make the thorn stitch, it's basically a combination of a single crochet and a half double crochet. For UK crocheters, that's a double crochet and half treble combination. All right, so if you look at the characteristic A shape of the stitch, you can see that on both sides of it, there is a space. And those two spaces are the insertion points for the hook. Okay, so I'm going to go into the first space, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now I want to pull it pretty high, maybe to the height where it's double the width of the hook. Then I'm going to yarn over, go into the space after the A shape of the thorn stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and also bring it up to about twice the width of the hook. Now I have 4 strands on the hook, so I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 4, and then chain 2. And that is a thorn stitch. So you can see the A that is formed by working a single crochet and a half double crochet together, followed by 2 chains. All right, so I'm going to do it again. I'm going to look for my insertion points first. So here's the first space in front of the A, and here's the space after the A. Okay, so I'm going to insert the hook in that first space, yarn over, pull up a loop, and loosen it. Then I'm going to yarn over, go into the second space, yarn over and pull up a loop. I have 4 strands, yarn over and pull through all 4, and then chain 2. All right, now I'd like to describe some of the characteristics of the thorn stitch. So let's look at the one that we did over here. Okay, so by working into the first stitch, you draw up legs of yarn. I call them legs because basically it looks like somebody who's straddling a horse or something like that. Anyway, so these are the the right side legs coming out of this insertion point, and these two strands are the left side legs coming from the opposite space. And then as I've drawn the three together, there's that yarn over that you made for the half double basically becomes this vertical strand right here in the middle of the stitch. Okay, now if you were to look at the top of the stitches, these two strands here are the top of the thorn stitch. But it's a little weird because if I rotate this back, these two strands basically are on top of the first space, the insertion point here. So really, the first leg of a thorn stitch goes into the top of a thorn stitch. Now, many people get confused. They see the A shape and they think that these two strands here are the top of the thorn stitch. Actually, these two strands come from the first chain one. The second chain creates this space and sets it up for this vertical bar that comes in between. Okay, so let's try it again. Here I have two chains. I look for that vertical bar and I look for the next thorn stitch. So I'm going to go into the thorn stitch first. This is the top of it. Insert my hook, yarn over and pull up. Make sure it's twice the height of the hook. Yarn over. This creates that center vertical bar of the thorn stitch. Go into the space after the thorn stitch, which is created by the second chain. Yarn over, pull through all four. Okay, so if I stop right there, the top of this is the top of the thorn stitch, but it's off to the right for right-handed crocheters. For left-handed crocheters, it would be off to the left. Then I chain one. That becomes the two bars that kind of sit on top of the thorn stitch. So, but it's not the top of the thorn stitch officially. Is these two bars? The first chain creates the visual top. It's kind of like the North Pole, where the magnetic pole isn't exactly where the geographic one is. And then I chain two, and that's going to create my next space. All right, so I go into there, yarn over, pull up a loop, make sure it's tall, yarn over, go into the space after that thorn stitch, pull through, and chain two. And that's what you do, working around all the thorn stitches of the hat. So we've worked across here. Now we've reached a bend in my quote-unquote swatch or rectangle, even though it has nothing to do with a hat. But I thought this would be an opportune time to show you how to work an increase. For the hat, there's going to be regular increases that happen every other round or so. Sometimes it's every round, it just depends on the spot that we are. And that creates the bigger circumference for the crown of the hat. So here though, I'm just trying to go around this corner, so I'm just going to increase here so that my work doesn't curl up. Okay, for an increase, what you need to look for is the two spaces with that vertical bar in between. All right, so the left legs of the thorn stitch I just made are going to go into this space. And then my next thorn stitch is over here. So I need to make a thorn stitch that goes in between these two. So I'm going to do it by making this bar an imaginary thorn stitch. So even though my left legs of the previous one are in that space, I'm still going to insert my hook into the same space, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and go into the second space right after that vertical bar, and make my thorn stitch and chain two. Right, for the next one, I'm going to go in where that space I've already used. I'm going to use it again and share the spot for the increase. And then I'm just going to do one more normal over the previous thorn stitch. Okay, and then now you can see here, here is one column of thorn stitches, here's the next column of thorn stitches, and I increased one in between, in between the hook here. So I increased one in between these two. All right, I'm just going to work across to the next corner of my swatch. Okay, so here I am. I want to work an increase between this column of thorn stitches and this column of thorn stitches. So I'm going to use this vertical bar as my marker of where I want to work the increase. So I'm going to go before that vertical bar, yarn over and pull up, yarn over for the half double crochet, pull up, and then go through all 4 strands, and don't forget to chain 2. I'm going into that shared space, and there you can see my increase right there between those two. All right, one of the other parts of the shaping of the hat are going to be decreases. And you might think, well, why would I ever need to decrease if I'm going up? Well, there's a variety of reasons, which I'll explain as we're working the hat. But for now, let me just show you how to work a decrease. Okay, so for a decrease, what we need to be doing is joining this column of thorn stitches and this column of thorn stitches and make the two join together into one. If you work into spaces, it actually pulls and makes the holes very wide open and kind of irregular. So instead, we're going to look for the 2 bars that sit on top of the thorn stitch. So this is kind of like the real North Pole, and this is the magnetic North Pole. So this is the real top of the thorn stitch. This is the visual top of the thorn stitch. So we are going to go into the first visual top and skip all these other spaces and go into the second visual top of the second thorn stitch, and that's how a decrease is made. Okay, so I'm going to insert the hook under those 2 strands, yarn over and pull up a loop to the right height, yarn over for the half double, go all the way over to the next thorn stitch and the visual top and insert the hook there and make your half double crochet. Finish the thorn stitch off. Oops. I'm just going to make one more thorn stitch here so that it's visually easier to see the decrease. Okay, so now you can see here is a column of thorn stitches. Here's another column of thorn stitches. Here are 2 columns that are now joined together into one. At the moment, it looks a little bit bumpy and loose, but eventually this becomes actually quite smooth and invisible. All right, so that is the decreasing. So now we're ready to work the hat pattern. Okay, for the hat, I used the worsted weight yarn. Today I'm going to try Red Heart Super Saver Stripes with this funky neon colorway. I think it probably will show up really well on the camera. And we're going to start right at the top. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways to start the top of the hat. Some of you might already know the magic loop, so go ahead and do the magic loop your way. If you've never done a magic loop before, I'm going to show you my strategy, although it's not everybody's favorite way of doing it. It's the one I'm comfortable with. Okay, so I'm going to lay the tail of the yarn across my 4 fingers with the end of the tail by my pinky. Okay, then I'm going to pinch the middle finger and thumb together and pinch the yarn there. And I'm going to wrap twice around the 2 top fingers. Then I'm actually going to lay it across those 2 strands, rotate my hand, and catch the yarn with my pinky. All right, now for the hat pattern, I'm using a 5mm hook. but you'll have to experiment around to see which one brings you the best gauge. Also remember, with a thorn stitch, there's a lot of elongating the loops by stretching up to twice the thickness of the hook. So hook size is going to be a lot more flexible. So it's going to be much more about your personal tension and what you can do to keep your stitches even. Okay, so back to the magic loop. All right, so I'm going to insert the hook under all the strands. Then I'm going to catch the loop that's over my pinky and pull it under the other ones. And then I'm going to chain one using the yarn that's between my pinky and ring finger. And there I've started my magic loop. So this is called the double magic loop, actually, because there's 2 strands. If you don't want to do a double, you can just do a single. And then what I tend to do is fish out the tail so that it's kind of out of the way. All right, so now I need to make 6 single crochet stitches. So 1, 2, 3. I like to pinch my work with my thumb and index finger, middle finger. Some of you might pinch it between your thumb and middle finger and index finger like that. So it's completely up to you. This feels very funny to me. I can't do it. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so there are my 6 single crochets. Now I'm going to figure out which of these 2 strands here is connected to the tail. So I'm going to tug on the tail a little bit and see which loops is moving. So basically, this one here is the one that's connected. This one here is the one connected to the tail. So that means I need to get rid of this loop first. So I'm going to pull on the one that's connected to the tail and on the upper end so that I can close that loop up. And now I can pull on the tail and it'll get rid of that other loop. So there are 6 single crochets around a magic loop. Okay, the other strategy, if you don't like magic loops, is a little bit different. So we're going to do a reverse slip knot. Most slip knots, when you make them, the strand that slips and that allows you to make the loop bigger and smaller is the end that's connected to the ball of yarn. So that's a normal slip knot. And so my tail doesn't move, and it's the other end that expands or contracts the slip knot. Okay, for a reverse slip knot, you want this tail end to be the one that moves. So what I do is bring the tail over the other end of the yarn, pinch the little X, and bring a strand of the tail up, and then I tighten the ends. And now, as you can see, this tail is the one that moves the slip knot, and that's a reverse slip knot. All right, so I'm going to tighten that down. Not completely tight though, because I need some room. And I'm going to chain 2. Okay, then in that first chain, that one single strand there, I'm going to make 6 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and now I can simply pull on that tail and it tightens up those 6 single crochets and cinches that center completely up. All right, So now we're ready for round 2 of the hat, and we're going to make 6 thorn stitches. Okay, so we need these 6 stitches, we need to focus on where they are for our insertion points. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we're not going to do any joining at this point. We're just going to look for the 6th, or actually the first single crochet of the round, and insert the hook in there under both strands. Pull up a loop, make it long, yarn over, and go in the same stitch. And then pull through all 4. Then we're going to chain 2. Right, then we move to the next single crochet, insert the hook, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, insert in the same stitch again, and pull up, and go through those 4 loops, and chain 2, go to the next single crochet, insert the hook, and pull up a loop, yarn over, go in the same stitch, pull up a loop, and pull through all 4. Chain 2, next single crochet under 2 strands, lift up a loop, yarn over, go in the same spot, pull up another loop and extend it, and pull through all 4, chain 2, go into this single crochet, and repeat the thorn stitch all worked into the same spot, chain 2, and the last single crochet. All right, so now, as you can see, this is the reverse slip knot, and my center ring here has opened up. No problem, I can just tug on it. Where did it go? And it cinches it closed again. Eventually, when I weave in the end, I'm going to secure it so that it can't come open again. But right now, while we're working on it, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so if we look at this, we have 6 thorn stitches. This one, this one, this one, 4, 5, 6 right here. Okay, so now we are going to join into the first thorn stitch. So we're going to look for that thorn stitch and the space before and the space after. Okay, in the space before, when I finish this thorn stitch, I'm only going to chain 1 now because I'm at the end of the row. I'm not going to chain 2 because that leaves a huge gap. Then I'm going to slip stitch in that first space and chain 1 to get ready for the next round. All right, so now we need to increase right away, and we need to increase by 6. So we're going to have 6 thorn stitches on this first round, and then we're going to have 12 on the next. Okay, so the join was right in that space before this first thorn stitch, and we're going to rework the first half of the next thorn stitch in that same space. So insert the hook in the same stitch as the join, yarn over and pull up a loop. Okay, then yarn over, go to the space after that thorn stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and complete the thorn stitch by chaining 2. Okay, now we have to work an increase. So we're going to look for that vertical bar in between the 2, and we're going to insert the hook first before it and then after it. Insert, lift up a loop, yarn over, insert after that bar, lift up a loop, pull through all 4, and chain 2 to seal off. Okay, now we're at a thorn stitch, so we'll go on either side of it. Okay, now we're at a vertical bar increase. So we'll go before the bar, lift up 1, yarn over after the bar, lift up a loop, and go through all 4, and chain 2. Now we're at the next thorn stitch. So we'll go before, and after the thorn stitch. Chain 2. Increase time will go before the vertical bar and after the vertical bar. And that was the increase, chain 2. Now we're at a thorn stitch, so we'll go before the thorn stitch, after the thorn stitch, and go pull through all 4, chain 2, increase time. Go before the vertical bar, after the vertical bar, pull through, chain 2, over the thorn stitch. Insert and you pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull up a loop in the next space, chain 2, increase in that vertical bar, okay, we're at the last thorn stitch, the 6th one of the previous round, so I'm going to go in before it. Now as you can see here, this is where the join was, so it's a little trickier to find the space. So it's going to be right before this strand of yarn. I'm going to go in there, pull up a loop, and chain 2. And now we have to do one more increase. Okay, so the increase is going to be worked before this vertical strand. And here's the slip stitch. And we're going to work, go in before the vertical bar and after that vertical bar. It's just a lot tighter. So insert and then go right there. It's kind of like into the slip stitch itself. And there was the increase. And now since I'm at the end, I'm not going to chain 2. I'm just going to chain 1 and slip stitch into the top of that thorn stitch. And this is the real top of it, not the visual top, but the real top. So under those 2 strands, slip stitch. Okay, and that is round 3, actually. So round 1 is the 6 single crochets, round 2 are the 6 thorn stitches, and round 3 is the 12 thorn stitches. Okay, so the next round is the plain round, and we're only going to work on thorn stitches without increasing. So I'm going to chain 1, go before and after that thorn stitch. Pull through all 4 and chain 2. Okay, look for the next thorn stitch, go before it and after it, and chain 2. Okay, at this point, you're going to start establishing your comfortable tension. Okay, so after you make the thorn stitch on top of the next one, if you chain really tight, if you're a tight chain person, you're going to start making the hat cup or curl up too soon. As you can see already, I've started curling here. You don't want it to curl yet. So make sure when you make your chain 2 that you don't do it overly tight. So just kind of a natural, where you can still see a little bit of space between the strands of yarn here on the chain. Okay, next thorn stitch. All right, and I'll meet you when I've gone all the way around. Okay, finishing up round 4, I have 11 thorn stitches around. So I have the 12th one to work right here. And this is where it's tight because of the join. So I'm going to insert in the space before, pull up a loop, yarn over. Okay, I have to tug a little bit to open up that space and make sure I go into the space that's right next to the thorn stitch. Okay, so I'm trying to avoid going into this tight little spot, which is the slip stitch, and going into that space. Okay, and since there's no increase, I don't have to worry about working into that slip stitch. So I'm going to chain 1, not 2, find the top of the first thorn stitch of this round, and slip stitch loosely into there. No need to really tighten things up. Chain 1, and I'm ready for round 5. For round 5, we need to increase a total of 6 thorn stitches around. I have 12, so to insert 6, I'm going to do 2 normal ones, then an increase, 2 normal ones, then an increase, and so on all the way around. All right, so I chained 1. Here's my first thorn stitch. Chain 2. 1 more regular one on top of the next thorn stitch. Chain 2. And now I'm going to increase by working on either side of that vertical bar. Insert there, yarn over, insert in the space after, and there's my increase. All right, so I'll meet you on the other end of the round. Do 2 normal, increase, 2 normal, increase, and we will end up with 18 thorn stitches. All right, this is exciting. The yarn is starting to change colors and the next stripe is starting to show up. Okay, so I have done 15 thorn stitches around, and what I have left here are 2 plain ones and 1 increase to work in that spot there. So I thought I'd show you how to do that one because that's where we are in the tight spot because of the join. Another plain one. Chain 2. Okay, so here I am at that slip stitch from the previous round. So I'm going to go find that little bar that's kind of underneath the slip stitch. I'm going to go in to the right of that, yarn over, and then go in the slip stitch itself and finish my thorn stitch, chain only 1, and then slip stitch to join in the top of that first thorn stitch. Okay, so now I have 18 thorn stitches around. The next round is a plain round with no increases. So you chain 1, go before the thorn stitch and pull up a loop, yarn over, go after the thorn stitch and pull up a loop, pull through all 4, chain 2 to seal off, and you do the same thing all the way around. Okay, so I'll meet you when we get to the end of round 6. Now I'm at the end of round 6. It's a plain round, so I'm just going to work my last thorn stitch. Chain 1. Avoid this slip stitch from here. Go underneath the 2 strands of that first thorn stitch of the round and just slip it together. Okay, so now I'm back at an increase round. So there's different things that you can do. So as you can see here, I have spokes now, the columns of the thorn stitches. So the previous increase round, we did 2 and then an increase, 2 and then an increase. So now we could do 3 and then an increase, 3 and then an increase. And what that creates is kind of a bit of a snail-like or a seashell type spiral. I don't know if I can point it out here. I don't think it really shows up very well. So what I'm trying to say is I could have, like from the center spoke here, this one coming out, and then here's an increase one, and here's an increase one. So if I place the third increase in between the spokes, always to the left of one spoke is where those increases are going to kind of pop out. And that's fine, you can do that. Or if you want, you can alter. So I could do 1 plain spoke increase here, then then crochet 3, then put an increase, and then crochet 3. So where you place the increases is up to you. You can have it in a regular spot, you can vary things around. The important thing to do or to remember is how many plain stitches are in between each increase. So in this case, the previous increase round was 2 and then an increase. So this time I'm going to do 3 and then increase. Chain 1 for the beginning of the round and work my first thorn stitch. Chain 2, another plain one, one more plain one, and here's my increase. Find the vertical bar, go to the one side of it, yarn over and the far side of it, and I've just made my increase. Okay, so now I need to do 3 plain, 1 increase, 3 plain, 1 increase. So I'll meet you on the other side. All right, so I'm at the end of round 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yep. So I have 1 more plain one and 1 increase to work around that slip stitch. Okay, so I'm going to do before and then after the normal thorn stitch, chain 2 because it's an increase in the next one. So go before that bar, yarn over, and then go under the 2 top stitches, the 2 top strands of that slip stitch. And then this time chain just 1 and slip stitch to join. Okay, so now I have a total of 24 thorn stitches. Okay, we're going to go up to 27 for a kid's hat, and 30 is for a teenager or small adult, and 33 is for a large adult size. Okay, so what I need to show you now is something that happens often when you have a pattern that goes in the round, and that is a diagonal traveling sensation. Okay, so if you look at these columns, they are going straight vertical down the hat. However, if you're not careful, your columns can start veering off in one direction. Now, some of you might not care, but some of you might want to offset that. So to offset that, what you need to do is decrease 2 stitches, decrease 2 thorn stitches on one side, and then increase a thorn stitch on the opposite. So that compensates for the one that you decrease here and you insert one on this side, and that helps the spokes stay straight without starting to twist into a spiral. So that's completely up to you. All right, so I said we had 24 here. So the next is going to be a plain round, and then we're going to increase by 3. Because this is a plain round, I am going to do the offset decrease to avoid that spiral from happening. Okay, so I'm going to chain 1 and work a normal thorn stitch right there. Okay, so next I'm going to decrease across these 2, but then I want to find the opposite spoke. So this is my first spoke. I'm going to come across to here. So I'm decreasing next to here, so I'm going to want to increase right here. So if I had a stitch marker, I'd put a stitch marker in that spot. Don't have one with me today. So I'm just going to count. So I'm going to decrease here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then put an increase on the opposite side. Okay, so here goes the decrease, chain 2 to seal that one off. Find the visual top of the thorn stitch, that's this one here, and the visual top of the next thorn stitch over there and work into those 2 spots. So insert, drop a loop, yarn over, go all the way over there, insert, pull up a loop, and then pull through all 4, chain 2 to seal. Okay, so now it's 10 plain ones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to insert my adjustment increase here, find the vertical bar and go on either side of it to make a thorn stitch. And then now I'm just going to finish my plain round. And I'll meet you at the other end. All right, so at the end of round 8, this was an adjustment round where I decreased here and increased opposite that. But basically it was a plain round, but I decided to make an adjustment. And as you can see, the shape of the beanie is starting to form, the little cupping at the top. All right, so for round 19, I'm going to only add 3 increases in total. So I have 24 stitches. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So I'm going to work 8 plain ones, then increase, then 8 plain ones, increase, 8 plain ones, increase, 8 plain ones, and increase right before the slip stitch. Okay, and so let me just get started. Chain 1, make a thorn stitch. Okay, next one. That's 2. Okay, so I'm going to work 8, increase, and I'll meet you around on the other side. All right, so I've increased by just 3 stitches, one there, and one there, 3 thorn stitches, and now I have 27. So now I'll stop increasing, and every other round I'll work one of those adjustment rounds where I'll decrease on one side and increase on the opposite side. And then you can go as long as you want, and there you'll have your hat. Now just a note about tension. Okay, so for me, with the 5mm hook and the number 4 worsted weight yarn, I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I was getting 6 thorn stitches per 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, roughly, if you count the little gaps in between, it's going to be maybe a little bit like 6.5. But basically, with the stretch of this hat, so you'll find that there's a lot of vertical stretch with the thorn stitch. So if you play around, you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you stretch it too much vertically, you're going to get 7 thorn stitches per 4 inches. But then once you pull it to its natural horizontal stretch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're going to get. All right, so roughly, if you get 6 thorn stitches to 4 inches, and you have, this is 33 thorn stitches around by the time I got to this point. So this is a large adult. And this one is 30 around, so this is a small adult or a teenager. And this one I'm going to have 27. But for all the details, feel free to go down to the link in the show notes at the bottom. And stay tuned for other patterns or you can go to my Ravelry page to look for other crochet and knit patterns that I have designed. And in the months to come, I hope to make more videos to help you guys learn some of my patterns. Thanks a lot, and I hope that you find my Facebook page, Charles Walth Designs, and my Facebook group called Lifelong Crochet, and come and join and share pictures of the thorn hats that you've made, thorn stitch hats that you've made, and hopefully you're modeling them, or somebody else is that looks really good in it, however you want to do it. Thanks a lot.